Hi folks, it's Sarah. Welcome to the Costume Codex. But this video isn't going to be about costumes. I've read a book recently that gave me a lot of thoughts and a lot of feels, and since I have this channel, this platform, I wanted to use it. So there's something that I haven't said on this channel, not in so many words, although, well, I am fat. Yes, it's a visual medium, you know that. But most of the time, for my videos, it shouldn't matter. And to most of you, I think it doesn't really matter. At least most of you don't comment on it. But for this video, it matters. And when I say I'm fat, like, well, you can see, but I wear size 30 jeans and I wear 4X tops. I am not mid-sized. I am fat. It is a undeniable, obvious fact about my body. And for this video, I am going to try not to apologize for that fact about my body. That's difficult because, oh, so many years of training. But I'm going to try and not comment, not apologize. Comment, yes, but not apologize for that fact about my body. And yes, fat is the word that I'm going to use. It's a neutral descriptor term. If conversations about fatness and anti-fatness make you uncomfortable, well, you can choose to be uncomfortable with me because they actually make me uncomfortable too. But I think we need to have these conversations. Or if it's not a good time for you, or you don't want to, for whatever reason, you know, I'll see you in the next video. But, you know, if you want to be uncomfortable with me, sometimes uncomfortable is a way of healing. So I want to talk about this book, what we don't talk about when we talk about fat, by Aubrey Gordon, published in November of 2020 by Beacon Press. Aubrey Gordon is a fat lady. She describes herself that way, as a fat lady about town. She used to write under the pseudonym Your Fat Friend, and writes under her own name for Self magazine. And I really appreciate her writing. The book is a series of essays that talk about what it is to be fat in a world that is anti-fat, that hates fatness. And she writes personal stories mixed with other people's stories and a lot of excellent hard data to back it up. My format when I recommend stuff, when I do these why I love such and such a thing videos, is to tell you why I love a thing, because I don't like to should people, even in something as little as you should watch this. I've been shoulded too much in my life. I don't like that word. But I can't say I love this book. Love isn't the word. I felt this book. Felt it in every inch of my fat body. I often had to stop after chapters or in the middle of chapters to process, and sometimes to cry. So just this once I am going to say should. I think you should read this book. I think if you live in a fat body, you should read this book. I think if you live in a body that the world says is fat, that's honestly just average, which is most of the world, certainly most of the West, then you should read this book. And if you live in a thin body, you should probably read it too. Because you may not be aware of the ways in which the world prioritizes your thin body over a body like mine. Even if there are other axes of oppression in which, you know, you are more at the sharp end than I, because I think we know these things are complicated. anti-fatness intersects in a lot of ways, in really complicated ways. I know that it's inseparable from my experience as a mixed race person, and from my experience as a fair-skinned person. And I count those as separate experiences. Well, separate, it's all my experience, but aspects of the experience, right? And it's entwined with my experiences as a queer woman, as a person with ADHD and depression, with, so many aspects of who I am. And there's ways in which my privileges, I'm well educated and come from a professional middle class family that has sheltered me from some of the worst of anti-fatness. Yeah, so yes, anti-fatness is a thing. It is an access of oppression. There are so many, and they all act differently, so I'm not going to compare one to the other. Just, they are all intertwined and they are all part of it, and the book goes into that. If you don't know part of the roots of anti-fatness, like, every other thing in the world relates to racism. The BMI was originally created as a way to establish the superiority of white people because they're smaller on average than non-white people. And so anti-fatness connects to prioritizing light people with European features over darker people with non-European features. Which is why I say it intersects with my fair-skinnedness and with my mixed raceness. Because part of my experience of anti-fatness is bound up with my experience as a mixed race person, as an ethnically ambiguous person, one who passes for white. There's not really a better word for that. Because the experience of passing, you see, is not acceptance. What it is conditional tolerance. You are tolerated by the dominant culture so long as you don't draw attention to the things that make you different, that make you other, that don't fit in. Not that this is a conscious thing by the members of the dominant culture. This is unconscious bias. And my fatness draws attention to my otherness. But on the other hand, it intersects with my Egyptianness in other ways because fair skin is very prized in Egypt, and so me having, and blue eyes, because because colonialism is the short answer. There's more to that. And so because I have the fair skin and blue eyes, the Egyptian people all thought I was supposed to be this kind of special person. And when I became fat, which I have been since I was a child, it was sort of like I failed an obligation. That's one of the ways in which anti-fatness manifests for me and for a lot of people. If you have a pretty face, there is a sense that by being fat, you have failed in your obligation to be pretty. That is kind of a weird space to be in. And please, I am not, I'm talking about a social thing. I'm not doing the tell me I'm pretty wash, like. So anti-fatness is an access of oppression. That may seem strange, because you may be used to thinking of anti-fatness as it being harder for fat women to get dates, or, people not thinking highly of themselves. That's often how the body positivity conversation comes about, is thinking about the self-esteem aspect. And that can be an issue. But when we talk about it as an access of oppression, it is things like having to consider whether a chair will hold you, being kicked off planes, people talking about you like you are an object. I've never been kicked off a plane, but boy, have I had the experience of people talking about me like I'm an object. One time sitting on a bus, it was crowded and an old man had no choice but to sit next to me. So he spent a good 20 minutes complaining to the entire bus about how he had to sit next to that. And yes, that's exactly how he phrased it. He did not look at me. He did not talk to me. He talked about me to an entire bus full of people. That was when I was living in Scotland. One advantage of Canada is people are passive aggressive instead. So people say things under their breath as they walk by. You should diet, etc., etc. And yeah, random strangers do like to give me diet advice. That is always fun. Anti-fatness is almost never seeing yourself represented on film, unless it's as a clown, or, supporting the main character who is more real because they are more thin. Or the butt of the joke, endlessly the butt of the joke. I am going to do a video at some point about anti-fatness in media. I'm at the research stage on that. Yeah, there is experiences like sitting in Avengers Endgame, and when Thor in his fat suit came out, the entire audience treated it like it was fucking Norbert, or the Nutty Professor. They were laughing at him the whole time. Mean, bullying laughter. While I sat there in my seat, in a body fatter than his. That is one aspect of anti-fatness. There are many. And I could, I've told you a couple stories, and Aubrey Gordon goes into a number of stories in her book. But I don't want to parade trauma, There are more stories, but I'm choosing not to tell them. I would like you to believe me that anti-fatness is a thing. So yeah, anti-fatness is everywhere. It is a big issue, and it was incredible to read it talked about honestly, the way that Aubrey Gordon does, and to have the science and the research in there too, to know that They've known for a long time that diets don't work. That they know that that talking about it as obesity epidemic is not helping. That the footage of headless fatties on the news is not teaching people to empathize with us. And yet they continue to do it because our society is built on this devotion to being thin that has taught us all to think of ourselves not as people trying to live a healthy life in the bodies we have, but as future thin people if we work hard enough. And I am tired of living like that. The one thing that I've really noticed about this year is that I didn't apologize for the space that I take up. And that felt good. And I don't want to go back to apologizing for the space that I take up. In the final chapter, Aubrey Gordon talks about her dream for a world without anti-fatness. And I don't know that I have a great, glorious dream for that. I find the body positivity movement, I really like some aspects of them, but other aspects, it's sort of incomplete. Because sometimes we talk about wanting to normalize bodies. And I don't actually want to do that. And there's a reason for that. When you normalize anything, when you create a norm, you will automatically create other people as being outside that norm. You can't really have everybody be normal. So I think, honestly, the best thing, not just for anti-fatness, but for all sorts of things, is to stop trying to have a normal for a way to be. Let's not have normal and abnormal bodies. I mean, they'll always be typical, but typical is not judgmental language the way that normal is. So let's not normalize bodies. Let's normalize behavior. And you know what behavior I want to normalize? Let's not comment on other people's bodies without their consent. I mean, let's not touch other people's bodies without their consent is, I think, the norm that we most need in the world. But also, let's not comment on other people's bodies without their consent. That means no giving me diet advice. Which, by the way, if you do in the comment section, you will be banned. No hurling insults at me and calling me a whale or any such. No asking someone what's in their pants. Not your business. No commenting if you think someone is attractive in there's a way to say, ooh, I think that person is beautiful. That is just, I think that person is beautiful. But don't go up to them and be like, you should smile more. Don't do that. Yeah. So no catcalling, no fat calling, no cat calling, no commenting on people's gender. Do nothing like that without consent. If you are my doctor, you will have consent to discuss my body with me. If you are not my doctor, you will not. If we are on a date, you make at some point have. there is a certain amount of consent to say certain things, you know? And I think that's generally the model, you know? There are things that we get to control and get to say that people do or do not get to do with our bodies. And I think we need to make a norm that we do not comment on other people's bodies. You know, when I talk about, I've had some time when I talk about how, as a fat woman, I don't get listened to in a lot of circumstances. Particularly young men tend to look right through me. I'm fat and middle-aged, that happens. Sometimes it's a benefit. But in class, it's not. And it can be really annoying. And when I tell people about that, sometimes they will launch into, oh, at this other point in history, a body like yours was the standard of beauty, whatever. I don't want that. I don't want those annoying little shits to look at me that way. I want them to look at me as a human. I think we all need to look at each other as humans and not as, you know, less or more valuable because of the size of our arses. Because the reality is some people will have a large ass and some people will have a small ass. Some people will have curly hair and some people will have straight hair. And, you know, some people will have bellies and some people won't. And that is just human variety. Yeah, that is my rant about fatness and anti-fatness. And yeah, can we just move towards a place where we respect each other as humans? I mean, that is the dream. But we have to get there by confronting stuff, by talking about things, by having the uncomfortable conversation. And that includes having an uncomfortable conversation about fatness. And how, besides not commenting, what else would I like you to do to make my life as a fat person a little easier? You know, because whatever your access of oppression or accommodation that you need, I hope that you tell me. So if I could ask you what to do to make life less crappy for fat people, well, I would read this book. You know, there's probably a waiting list in your library, but you can still get to it. Because she has a lot of good suggestions, as she does on the podcast Maintenance Phase. But one thing you can do, make sure that the furniture that you have can actually support your friend's weight. Especially, and if you are trying to make a place accessible, if your chairs if your chairs have a weight limit, especially a low weight limit, your place is not accessible. It's not. If there are, if all of your chairs have arms, your place is not accessible. And it's simple to just get chairs that don't have arms that can take heavier weight. If you are going out with your fat friend and there is a place with booths and such, you can ask to not sit in one of those booths. Or you can let your friend choose the place to sit. That's a good one. You can listen to what we say. You can challenge body shaming. Body shaming is a problem no matter who the target is. I got in a few discussions when a certain person was a figure of authority in a certain country towards the south of me, because a lot of people thought that commenting on his size or ability was funny. They still do. But he does not see your tweets. I do. Your other friends do, who have mobility issues or weight issues. And it's not nice, because you're automatically, what you're doing there is linking fatness to, you know, that. To unpleasant connotations. And especially when there are plenty of other things to criticize about a person like that. And we all know who I'm talking about. Then, you know, don't comment. It all comes back to don't comment on people's bodies. That is the thing. Make sure that people's bodies are not going to stop them from getting what they need. And don't comment on them unless they invite you to. And don't talk about your own. Don't do the, oh, I feel so fat. Does this make me look fat? Don't do that. Because you're saying that fatness is immoral. That fatness is disgusting. And we all hear enough of that. So don't do that. Those are some simple ways to make life less crappy for fat people. Anyway, the point of this video, apart from me needing to get off some of my chest, some of the thoughts that this book has inspired, is that I really think you should all read the book. So I'm going to put a link to it in the description of this video. And yeah, that is me talking about fatness. So, as to the comments of this video, your video, the YouTube tends to flag comments that talk about fatness, which is good because often they're people being mean. So if you comment something about fatness that's not fat shaming or anti-fats, it might not appear right away, but I will probably make that, approve that or whatever. If you comment fat shaming me, I have a policy of banning fat shamers. I started that from the first time they found my channel, and I will continue to do so. And that includes concern trolls. So, I don't know how many people will see this, but yeah. I'm aware that by talking about fatness, I am probably gonna get a certain amount of hate. But that's the breaks. Sometimes things need to be talked about anyway. Sometimes uncomfortable is worth it. So, yeah, this is me ranting and being uncomfortable. I hope it makes some kind of coherent video.